Daniel here for Tabletop for One with my top 10 list of favorite ways to house rule games. And I thank you for joining me tonight. Now, I know this topic might not be for some people because some people don't like any house rules in games. Now, before I get to the list, I want to talk about the nature of these house rules. So I want to get something across right away. I'm not trying to improve on the design of designers. I'm merely trying to offer ways that you can tailor the solo gaming experience in a way that you enjoy it more. So as you're playing different games, you might want to tweak things here and there that just help you enjoy the game more. And you may say, no, you can't do that. It's not in the rules. It's, not part of the game. Well, the fact is a lot of these house rules that I have implemented in some of my games, they're actually found in other games as what are called variants or modules and stuff like that. So other games already employ these things as natural rules or optional rules and that sort of thing. And so I've taken a lot of those from other games and employed them in games that I have. Now, some of these house rules will come across as making games easier, and some of them won't. Some of them extend the game, and some of them may shorten the game. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but let me just get started at number 10. And so with number 10, I'm going to talk about Mulligan, all right? So when you take a mulligan in a game, you're talking about, starting over, redrawing cards or resetting up the table. And so the game I want to talk about that I might do that in is Nusfjord. Now, Nusfjord is one of my favorite games from Uwe Rosenberg. It is a fantastic farming game. And so you're in this village in Nusfjord and you're trying to farm fish and build buildings out on your land, and you're trying to score the most points. It's a beat your own score solo mode. Now, at the start of the game, you actually set up the board with a randomized setup of different levels of cards A, B, and C. And sometimes that randomized setup, you can look at it, especially if you're more experienced in the game, that you can see, I'm not going to score at all that well. The setup just doesn't work for me this round. And so what I would say is just mulligan, discard all the cards, shuffle them, and redraw. It seems like a simple house rule, but instead of trying to play out that game with, a hand that's dealt to you or a randomized board setup that's dealt to you in a way that you just don't think you're going to succeed, then just redo it, reset it up. It'll only take a few seconds and you don't have to play through the game and find out what you already think you know. Now, of course, you could be wrong about that, but, you just feel free to do that. All right, so the next house rule might ruffle some feathers, and I apologize ahead of time. This is for a very popular solo game, but there was something about it I found a little restrictive, and so I decided to house rule it a little bit. And that is in Ark Nova. And this can apply to really any kind of game like this, where you're drawing cards and then having to discard cards, so you get to see a couple and then discard one. Now, if you know in Ark Nova, the first level of that action has you drawing a card and discarding a card. So your net gain is no cards. So you're going to end up with the same amount of cards, but of course you could discard one from your hand that you might not need or whatever. But what I have here is instead, you're going to draw an extra card and, discard whatever the game tells you. So if the game tells you draw one, discard one, instead draw two and discard one. And so it increases that amount by one. And it works in games like this where there's a huge stack of cards that in the solo mode, you're never going to go through all those cards. It's going to take you, forever to try and even go through all those cards. There's just not enough time in the game, not enough actions. And so this allows you to see more cards as you go. And it does make it a little easier on you because it gives you better choices. Or, well, it might give you better choices, it might not, but it does make it slightly easier. But for people like me who like to see more cards and have more choice in the matter, this would be a house rule I employ. All right, so for number 8, this house rule goes out to those who don't like beat your own score solo modes. So instead of a beat your own score solo mode, just make yourself a win-loss condition. And so that's going to go with role player. Now, Role Player is this fantastic dice manipulation game that's all about, developing a D&D-like character. You're going to be rolling their stats and trying to develop their strength, constitution, wisdom, and all that. It's all about manipulating dice, with that kind of theme on it. You don't actually do anything with the character unless you get the Monsters and Minions expansion. But I actually prefer the base game over including the Monsters and Minions expansion. I'm one of the few that do. But the base game comes with just a beat your own score solo mode. I don't mind that at all. I've played this game dozens of times with just the beat your own score solo mode. But I've also implemented a win-loss condition along with that. And so in my win-loss condition for this game is that depending on your character card, you have to meet those goals. And you can also do it on your alignment card, that you have to be in the right alignment. And so you're either placing the colored dice in the right positions according to your character card, or doing the right alignment, or both. You can really just choose it as you will. And so that would be your win-loss condition for this game, at least that's for me. All right, and so now for number 7, this is a rule I call the last stand. So in adventure games where you can die and lose the game, it's kind of like, oh man, I have to reset up the game and replay the scenario or whatever. And sometimes the game even feels unfair sometimes when you lose. And so what I like to do is sometimes implement a last stand mode. And so the game that I do that for is Cthulhu Death May Die. Now, Cthulhu Death May Die, if you haven't played this game, is one of the best dungeon crawler games. It's such a fantastic game, fantastic production quality, comes with 6 different scenarios, so many different investigators. It comes with 2 different Elder God bosses that you can fight. You can get expansions for more. There's a lot of different enemies. It's such a blast to play. I love this game. It's so great. Now, in this game, you're going to play upwards of 2 or 3 characters. I always recommend 3. 3 is good, but if you play 2, it's going to be harder to play. If you play 1, it's going to be very hard to play. But what I do is I implement a last stand. So, if you get to the point of dying, and you can either do it by health or by insanity, either way, what you can do is you can implement a rule that you can roll dice, or you even just get a straight up last stand. But what I do is I roll all the dice that I have available, and if I get more hits, then I do misses and tentacles, the little tentacle icon, then my character survives and gets some of their hit points back. The other option to do is to give them enough hit points back, or all their hit points back, or if they died by insanity or went insane, then move them back 1 level on the insanity track, but then they lose a skill level permanently. They don't gain it back. And so that was something that I implemented as well. Now, you can do this in lots of games. You can do it in Marvel Champions, where, if you die from a hit, you can instead do a last stand where you have to guess what kind of card is on top of your deck and then flip that card over. So you guess, is it an attack? Is it a support card or something like that? Flip it over, and if you're correct, then you survive and you heal a certain amount of hit points. So there's different ways you can do it. I always do it, though, that you can only do 1 last stand per character for the entire game. So do keep that in mind. I recommend don't doing more than that. But adding that random element of you may get a last stand or you may not is a really good way to do it. There's other games that do it. Plum Island Horror is one game that does the last stand mode, and I love that. I love that fact. It adds a little extra layer of strategy as you kind of count on it sometimes. And so, yeah, it's great. But yeah, I recommend doing it for Cthulhu Death May Die and other games like that. Like I said, Marvel Champions. Mostly any game where you're fighting a boss battlers, something like that where you can die. Yeah, those are the games that I would recommend doing it. All right, so the next one at number 6, this one I call Jumpstart Your Engine. All right, so you have different kinds of games that are engine builders or deck builders or bag builders or something like that, where you start with a generic set of cards or tokens or anything like that. And so sometimes that first turn is just so lackluster. Like, it's just awful. That first turn is like, okay, I draw 5 money, now I can buy 1 card from the market. Bypass that. Just forget about that. Don't even do that, all right? So when you set up those games, especially games that have a market of cards like deck builders, and one game that comes to mind is Marvel Legendary, when you do that, instead give yourself the ability to draft one card from the actual market for free. And I'm not talking about any card. You draft the max amount of money that you could possibly draw during your first hand. And so it could be, 5 or less in most cases. And so, yeah, you just draft a card or 2 even. You can even do 2 cards up to the value of 8 or something like that, because most games like that come with 8 money, to start in your deck. And then you just shuffle them into your deck, and then you draw your first cards for the game. I highly recommend this. Those first few turns are just really kind of lackluster. They really are. And if you need to give the boss or the game, the AI or whatever, a boost, you can do that. You can figure that out for each game you play. That might, involve them advancing their agenda or getting, they're doing more damage to you or something like that right from the get-go. But it just skips the first couple turns real quickly, allows you to draft a couple cards and get your engine going. You can take it further than that if you want. I don't necessarily recommend that, but you can. I mean, just, the sky's the limit on something like that. It's going to shorten your game time a bit, because you're just going to get that further ahead early on, and you'll be able to do more quickly. And so that might actually help you, especially with games that take longer. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it. I do it with a lot of deck builders. There's very few deck builders that I won't do that with. All right, so for number 5, this one I call earn more experience, all right? So along the same lines of Cthulhu Death May Die, there are some games out there that are brutally hard, all right? In a good way, okay? And the one that comes right to mind is Bloodborne, the board game. Now, you know me, I love Bloodborne, the board game. I'm planning on doing a tutorial solo playthrough later this month. It's such a fantastic game, but it is very difficult, all right? It is very difficult to play. And, you die often. The thing about this game, though, is you die and lose any experience you've earned, okay? You get to come back to life, but of course that advances the timer of the game and that sort of thing. But in this game, experience is hard to come by. So what I do is I implement a bonus experience. And I'm not talking about every time you kill an enemy, you get an extra bonus experience. That's double the amount of experience. I wouldn't recommend that at all. But instead, what I would recommend is that you set, a limit. If you enter the dream realm with a certain amount of experience, you get to add in an experience, just one. And so I either do that with 2 or 3, depending on, the level of difficulty of the scenario that I'm playing. And so if I enter the dream world with 2 experience, I'll get 1. Or if it's 3, I'll get 1. It's not a huge boost, but it might be just enough of a boost to take the edge off of how difficult this game is. And you can do this with other games as well. You can also do it instead with something like, if you kill an enemy with the exact amount of health they have left. So if an enemy has 2 health left and you hit them with a damaged attack that does 2 damage, then it's kind of like what I call a precision kill. And so if you do a precision kill, then maybe you get a bonus or something like that. It could be XP, it could be, money or loot or whatever the game offers. You can figure that out on your own. But that is one way that I recommend doing it. And, it also kind of adds like a little extra challenge. All right, if I play this card and do this attack, then I'll get a precision kill and I'll get that bonus. But if I do this other attack, I won't take any damage and I won't get that precision kill, and so I'll just get normal experience or something like that. There's different ways to look at it, but it does provide an extra little puzzly nature sometimes, depending on how you implement it. All right, so speaking of games with lots of cards like Ark Nova mentioned earlier, there is a game that came before Ark Nova that a lot of people said Ark Nova destroyed. I disagree there, but this game is Terraforming Mars. So instead of, the draw extra card option, in Terraforming Mars, you draw cards at the beginning of every round. You draw 4 cards and you buy 3 of them if you'd like. Instead of that, in the solo mode, I highly recommend that you institute a draft. And so when you institute a draft in Terraforming Mars, you're going to draw those 4 cards, and then you're going to choose one of them to hold on to. And then you're going to draw 3 cards and choose one of them to hold on to, and then you'll draw 2 cards and you'll put all those into your hand and then decide from those 4 which of those you want to buy. And again, you can only buy 3 of them. And so it allows you to see more cards because Terraforming Mars, that deck is huge too. Especially if you add another expansion like Venus or something like that. There's just so many cards in there. And so you institute a draft that you would actually find in the multiplayer mode if you use the drafting variant. And so instead you just do it in the solo mode. And I highly recommend it. It's such a great way to see more cards and give you more choice about what you're getting. It makes you feel less punished by that draw because sometimes the draw is just flat. You'll draw 4 cards and you may not even want any of them. But instead with this, it allows you to then see more cards. You'll see a total of 9 cards and draw or buy 3 of them rather than just seeing 4. All right, and so my next favorite house rule, number 3, is customize the difficulty. Now in games, you'll have a lot of difficulty levels. They'll say there's easy mode, normal mode, hard mode, and something like that. But very few times will you see any variation between those difficulties or any ways to customize different areas of the game. Now, one game that I recently saw that they did that and was just thrilled about it is Galactic Cruise. I'm not talking about that game right now, but I will tell you they have a customizable difficulty in Galactic Cruise, and you can customize 3 different areas with easy, medium, and hard levels for each of those areas, and it's fantastic. I love the fact that they have that. But the game I'm going to talk to you about is my number 3 favorite game of all time, and that is Warfighter. Now in Warfighter, there's a whole bunch of ways to customize the game, but as far as difficulty goes, there's different ways to customize it. Sometimes the game can be very difficult, especially on certain missions. And so one of the ways to do that is to lower the threshold. See, in this game, you're going to be spawning enemies based on your loadouts and how many resource points you spent on your squad. But sometimes even if you max that out for the level you're looking at, it's sometimes just not enough, and the missions can be just super difficult. So in that case, what I would say is lower the level of what hostiles show up. So if you're spawning enemies for a level of 40 and the next level below is 31 or something like that, choose the next level below even though you have 40 resource points of equipment and squad. Yes, it makes the game easier, but sometimes some of those missions are there's just no way of winning. The mission and objective together, they're just super difficult. On the other end of that spectrum, you can customize it and make it more difficult for you because there are some missions that are easier. And so the way you can do that is you can mix the elite enemies and the frontline enemies, and so you can customize by adding some elite enemies or swapping out some frontline enemies with elite ones and that sort of thing, and you can tailor it to your own experience. So yeah, there's so many ways to do it. Warfighter's a great way to do it. And games that already have that, like I said, Galactic Cruise has that for its AI, but one game that has the best customizable difficulty ever, that's going to be Spirit Island. It does it the best way, and it does it so well. All right, so we're down to the final 2, and this number 2 one, I think you're going to be surprised by what it is. It sounds super simple, but it works so well, all right? And so this one is called Don't Shuffle Between Plays. So in games where there's lots of cards, like Terraforming Mars, like Ark Nova, and like Wyrmspan. Wyrmspan has a huge deck of dragon cards and cave cards. There's just a lot to the game. And during the game, you're going to go through maybe a quarter or a third of those cards. The thing about Wyrmspan is when you get it on the table, you just want to play it again. And you want to play it again and play it again. And what I'm going to tell you is, as much as the rules say, shuffle the decks and then deal out the cards, I'm going to tell you, when you're finished with a play, take all the cards that you played, the AI took and all that, and the ones in the discard pile, flip them upside down, stick them underneath the deck, and just start the next game. You don't even have to change the objectives. You don't even have to change the guild. Just start the next game. I mean, you could switch those things out, but honestly, if you just flip that over, reset the resources, start the game, it's going to save on setup time. You're going to see a whole bunch of different dragons that you didn't see during that play. And so you're going to, be challenged with different synergies and that sort of thing. And it's quick to set up that way, and you're ready to go, and you're going to have another play done in no time, and you could do it again and probably still not see the same dragons that you saw in the previous 2 plays. There's other games that already say do that. Raising Robots was one of those games that said play 3 games in a row, don't shuffle the decks, just put them underneath and start the next deck. So you can do it either way. But yeah, it's just a great way to do it. And I highly recommend it with any games, especially the games that have huge decks of cards that you're not going to see everything anyways. All right, and now we're down to our final one, my number one favorite house rule to implement in board gaming, and that is called just one more round. See, there are lots of games that you are playing and the game ends and it feels like, oh man, the game ended too early. I want to play just one more round. And one of those games that's notorious for this, and a lot of engine builders are notorious for this, but the one that's really notorious for this is It's a Wonderful World and It's a Wonderful Kingdom. Now, It's a Wonderful Kingdom, it's such a great solo game. I love this game. The modules in this game add such a thematic flair to this game and extra challenges. It's fantastic. But like its sibling, It's a Wonderful Kingdom ends one round too soon, or sometimes it feels that way. So all I do is just do one more. Just set it up so that I can do one more. That's it. And the fact is that that sort of thing is kind of game breaking, because at that point your engine's just so good and you're putting out so many cards. But if you're enjoying that process, just do it. Put out those cards, build all those things, have this massive resource production and point generation. Who cares at that point? Just have fun with it. Because if you're enjoying that and you want to play one more round, why not? Why not indeed? And so I highly recommend it. Just keep it going. You can do that with a lot of engine building games. You can do that with Revive. You can do that with Terraforming Mars. You can do that with so many games. If you want to play an extra round, if you love how it's going, if you love how your engine's working, then give yourself an extra round. Yeah, I do that in a lot of games because, I'm just having so much fun in that moment. I just don't want it to end. All right, and so there you have it. That was my top 10 list of favorite house rules that I like to implement in the games. Now, a lot of these house rules can be implemented in a lot of other games not shown here. And so I hope I gave you some good ideas of how to tailor your solo gaming experience in a way that you might enjoy it. But you'll have to let me know in the comments below how wrong I am for even suggesting the idea. I know house rules are taboo for a lot of people, but you know what? You don't have to use them. And the fact is if some people do use them, it's not a big deal. If you ask a lot of designers, they will say, if they bought the game, it's their game. They can do whatever they want with it. I've heard so many great designers echo that. And, that's the thing. They want you to enjoy their game, even if you do, tailor the experience. And that's what I'm calling it, tailoring the experience in a way that helps you enjoy it more. It's not to say that they've designed a bad game. It's really not. It's just to say that you prefer it a certain way because you're a person, you're an individual. You enjoy things the way you enjoy them. So do that. I want you to enjoy board gaming the way you like to enjoy it. And I hope I've given you ideas of how to do that. And so let me know in the comments below what you thought of this list. Please like and subscribe to this channel if you like the content you see here. And I thank you to my Patreons for their support of my channel. And I thank you for joining me on Tabletop for One. Have a great night.